series of webinars with another one has been scheduled next week, so another few over the next few months. Just for housekeeping, the quick note is please do put your cameras and your microphone off. That should help everybody in a broadband kind of sense. And finally, I would like to let you know that our session is and will be recorded. It's in order for people that are unable to join today, then can have a look at the session's info. So without further ado, I'm going to start that webinar 3. And the first thing is what the webinar 3 is about. So agenda-wise, it's about the waste and the circular economy. So we're going to focus on chapter 5 today. We do a quick recap of session 1 and 2, which were generic. And I'll explain the program we've put in place and the methodology we're going to use during that program. And in terms of chapter, we know this is chapter 5. And we'll look at the same concept that we use. Discover, we looked at innovations. For define, we looked at opportunities that the chapter is providing. Develop the skills to tap into those opportunities. And in terms of delivering, we're going to look at the roadmap. So that's the agenda for today. As a note, we'll take a 5-minute break after our innovation session, which is the bulky piece of the presentation. So summary, what did we do in session 1 and 2? We looked at the 5W and the 2Hs. So that was the why, and we looked at the customer, we looked at all the chapters opportunities. So that was more generic. We're going to be specific today, looking at chapter 5. The who was about the employees, and then the when was a policy. We looked at the roadmap. And what we, I think, agree on is that to tap into those opportunities, innovation is going to be required. So we looked at, and innovation will require skills. So we focused on skills and how those could be funded and how those could be acquired.
Eric, you've been muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I'll go back. Sorry, didn't realize, apologies for that. I didn't realize I was on mute. So the summarization of session 1 and 2 were the 5W and 2Hs, customer, chapters, employees, and how to get there, what to do, where are the opportunities. And those were more generic across the 8 chapters. Today we're focusing on one chapter, and I'll come to that, the reason for it, the rationale for it a bit later on. But today is about chapter 5, which is circularity and waste management. So what we came out of those 2 chapters or those 2 sessions is that innovation is going to be required. And that innovation starts with desirability, and we looked at the needs and the social trends and the market trends that drive those desire. And we also need feasibility to deliver that. And in here, one of the key pillars is a company strategy. And we will see in terms of technology trend and feasibility and supply. And in terms of viability, and then it's driven by, again, the company strategy, whether the company want to play and what the markets want. So that was the how, so the why, the what, and the how. So innovation, we talked about the stakeholder. Who's the stakeholder? The consumer. And that drives social trends, and that allows you to create a vision. And in our webinar, that's why we looked at the why, the creating that vision about why do you want net zero. Then the other stakeholders in there is the customer, and what they drive is a market, is a need, is a requirement, and that creates a motivation. And that motivation we looked at in terms of chapters into part 2 of what we've been out, which was looking at the what. And then you've got the next stakeholder, which is the supplier, the upstream. So the other ones are downstream, that is upstreams. And that could be supply of technology in the sense of equipment, raw materials, skills, and that provide the capability. And we focused in part on the skills part, the how. And finally, we need a business strategy. So what I mean by that is that once you've identified what the opportunities are and what you need to tap into the opportunity, you need to have a vision and a strategy of how you're going to get there. And you do that by developing a roadmap. And in the case of net zero, we were looking at policy, which we talked about in part 4. And you've got those 4 pillars, you get innovations. You miss one of them, and you're going to have an issue. So if you don't have a vision, you're going to create confusion. If you don't have a motivation, you're going to face resistance. And if you don't have the capability to tap into those vision and motivation, you're just going to generate frustration. And finally, you need a roadmap, because without a roadmap, all the previous work is going to be wasted, because nobody's going to listen without a roadmap. So that's what we came up with. And that was reinforced by a report that came out from Hemming on International Innovation Barometer. And if we look at the UK specifically out of that report, then you can see that innovation is a requirement. It's a requirement to deliver a vision. And that's why, the net zero, the environment, the customer, the consumer, the competitors, etc. And what we look at in the UK, where people carry their innovation is where there is talent, and there's plenty of that in Scotland. Where the organization is, and mainly we're looking at Scotland here, but UK wide, but it's with a strong focus on Scotland, and that's capability, and that's the how and the where. So how do you bring that capability in-house, and where can you go and get it? How do people in the UK, or do companies in the UK found that research? Well, it's mainly a financial incentive through national grants and tax credit. And from that, you can develop a roadmap, which we talked about, whether it's the when and the who. So when do you do what you want to do? And who is your employees? And interestingly enough, the motivations, where does it come from? And that supports what we talked about in the previous webinars, which is really the customer demanding. And more as part of the procurement exercise and tendering, you've got more and more customers say, what are you doing about net zero? What are you doing about sustainability? What are you doing about the environment? And last but not least is because those opportunities offer a chance for improved performance. So businesses are interested. So that's a motivation piece. So we did a survey at the end of the second webinar, and we've developed our program and our methodology based on the outcome of that survey. So the first thing that came clear out of that survey is the interest was in innovations. And examples of innovation, basically to generate, I would think, ideation within the organizations, whichever organization you're in, and looking at innovation specifically in Scotland, but also further afield. So that's what we will be looking at. And then what we looked at were the chapters were the most wanted, if you want, the keener interest. The one that came at the top was waste and circular economy, which is what we're going to do today. And then I'll show you the rest of the program coming up. But today we'll focus on that one. And when we looked at what was it between skills, opportunities, or roadmap, I would say they all came about the same, with skills slightly on the top of it. So what we've developed is a program that addresses all three, rather preferring one over the other. So what is our program looks like? So we had webinar 1 and 2, which were generic, and we named them session 1, session 2, looking at all 8 chapters and the 5W and the 2 H's. Today we're doing webinar 3, which is focused on waste. And you would have seen next week on Tuesday, we're looking at electricity and nets. So if you think about the Mentimeter survey we just looked at, those were the top 3. And then we'll be doing another webinar on chapter 2, 3, and 4. And then we'll finish the series with webinar 6, with chapter 6 and 7. So that's the plan for the last 2. We still need to agree on the dates. you're probably thinking about once a month towards the end of the years or something like that. But we will come back to you with more definitive dates on that. So that's the program. What is a methodology? So we've used that same methodology, which is, we start with innovation and end up with a strategy. On the ideation piece, we looked at the discover, and we will talk about all those innovations in Scotland and further afield. That's what we agreed to do. In the define, we looked at the opportunity the chapters offer, and that's driven by the climate change plan from the Scottish Government and the actions and the outcomes they are looking for, and by default the policy to deliver all that. In develop, we looked at skills, especially looking CSAM has been developed by SDS, and what skills are available and where and how you find them. And finally, we looked at what are the options to deliver, and that's the roadmap. And we already mentioned that we want a smart roadmap. That's what we're looking for. So that's what we're going to be using as a methodology. Today is chapter 5. As I said, next week we're looking at 1 and 8. And we'll be looking at innovation in Scotland, the UK, and further afield. So that's his methodology. So I'm going to start with innovations and discover. And that's what came out of example of innovation and focused on chapter 5. So those are the actions. It's just to explain what we've been doing. That has been what we looked at in chapter 2, session 2, sorry, when we looked at the opportunities. And I've basically created an icon for each of the actions. And the idea behind that is that I'll show you in the innovation which one of those opportunities the innovation is tapping into. So for all the innovations, I'll follow the same template, which is obviously, so we've got chapter 5. I'll describe what I see as being the vision, the motivation, the capability, the roadmap, and I've color-coded those the same way than the slide you've already seen. We look at if the innovation is in Scotland, the UK, or further afield, and when relevant, what academic institution was involved in it. We had a quick picture representation of what the innovation is, the descriptions, and the company involved in it. So to start with, remember we're looking at waste and circular economy. An example of innovation is Live and Seed. And in here, that's a Scottish innovation, and that's what I'll start with, which got supported by Strathclyde Uni. And you can see here they had a vision, and that vision was an alternative to landfill, and it was using the leftover byproduct of their process. And to do that, they patented the process. So they had the capability, they had a vision, they had the capability, and they had the motivation because the construction industry is really keen on becoming greener, and concrete is definitely a high energy user. So they had the motivation, and they developed a roadmap, and the roadmap included that certification, accreditation they got from CIPA. So you can see how all 4 pillars are met, and that's an example. In the circular economy, you can see that at the top, because they are reusing their waste, and by doing so, they minimize the waste to landfill, and they've improved the efficiency of their plant, minimize waste, and would say enhance or driven investment in reprocessing. So that's why you see at the top, you would see the icon I've selected for that innovation. So that's one innovation. Phenotype, sorry, is the same one, the same concept, but in here they are looking at demolition and construction waste. So that's the capability. It's still the construction sector for motivations, and it's still the motivation is landfill. So it's still tapping into the opportunity of circular economy, less waste to landfill, and less waste overall, and less waste to landfill, and investment in reprocessing technologies. A similar process is Quantic that's developed, and here their byproduct is coming from shellfish, and therefore the waste shells. That's what they've developed the capability to reuse those. And the key thing here again is circular economy, because they're using a waste byproduct, and it's food, so they tap into food minimization of food waste to landfill and minimization of landfill to start with, and because it's organic, then they minimize the emission from landfill, and they minimize waste overall and generate investment. So you can see how those guys tap into quite a few of those actions and opportunities. Another example is Superglass, which is recycling, glass to create insulations. And again, you're looking at circular economy. So you can start to see the trend here about the circularity and the value in waste. Another one is Horizon Proteins, and in here what they are looking at is a byproduct from the whiskey manufacturing industry, and they've developed again their own patented technology. And what they're aiming at doing, they've got a roadmap, is producing animal and fish feeds. So that's again, you've got a vision, you've got motivation, capabilities, and roadmap. So that delivers innovations. And in terms of actions, you've got circularity, food waste, waste overall, emission because it's organic, and investment in that. So those is another example. Here, more about out of the box, I would say, is here from hairdressers, and the concept here is just to show that there is value in waste, and in waste you will think there is value within to start with. And in here, what they saw, the capability they saw is how hair absorb water, doesn't absorb water, sorry, but does absorb oil, and they were looking at clean oil spills, to clean oil spills, using these. So, and reuse it. So I'm not suggesting we should all become hairdresser, but just a good example of what, how there is value in waste. And then if we carry on that concept of circularity and value in waste, in Scotland, all those have been in Scotland. You've got Argent Energy that creates biodiesel from fats and oil, or you've got Aurora that create mushrooms from coffee and whiskey byproducts, and that also has an effect on tree growth. And CCL North, and here the waste is the IT equipment, and it's recycling, still in Scotland. And then root vegetables for paint application and a thickener for paint. So another byproduct, another minimization. You can see circularity, no food waste, no emission, the minimization to landfill. Celtic Renewables, in this case, is how they are doing biofuel from biological byproduct. And again, here you can see the circularity piece to it, and you can see it's food waste and waste in general. Investment, vodka from potatoes, and not any potato. The potatoes are unsellable. The potatoes that would normally go in the bin because they are not good enough for retail. And then Joe Brew has developed a beer from bread. Peel Tech has developed animal feed, developing animal feed from peel and starch from chippy, basically. And tires, which is recycled, sorry, and looking at applying vulcanized rubber to high quality applications, for devulcanized rubber powder. So out of tires. You got Sweat, again, it's still a Scottish company in here. They're looking at straw and bamboo to develop reusable water bottle. Reusability is a big thing. So, and you can then start looking outside the circularity. So those where you've seen the trend, all about waste and circularity, and not use your own or other people's waste. In this case, if you look at Paxil, It's about minimizing, the waste instead of energy, maximizing the life cycle of the product. We can hear some bird here. I think someone put their mic on.
I'll just look for that person and see if I can switch the mic off.
So that was one, if you want. In this case, it's not about circularity. It's about minimizing the amount of waste, and it's not the waste in the material you machine. It's how much you use to machine that material. UK water is another one, and in this case, it was not circular economy, but it's about managing what was discharged, and they got involved in that Donlock environmental enhancement project, DEEP, and they had again a customer Glenmorangie, and again in Scotland, and again supported by universities in Scotland, Heriot-Watt in this case. And then if you go further afield, then you have other innovations from the UK, and this is more about data. So waste data, and it's with a particular focus on food waste. And that we know, which can measure how much waste is put in a bin, basically, by kitchens, and how to manage it and what to do about it. So it's about data. You can see under the icons. It's about food waste and waste to landfill. Or the more further afield, but going back to circularity, here you've got College of Arts St Martin's, who's developed tiles and construction materials from bioconcrete with and crayfish shells. Here you've got an example in the UK again where they're recycling gum and an opportunity to do better things as a rubber. And then further afield, so further than the UK, an example is Airbus, and Airbus had the vision was to use generative design, and what that is a technology that allowed to mimic how natural system evolve, change and grow themselves and build themselves. And that's what they use in 3D printing. So that's an example of how to, if you want, improve on what you have. It's not about circularity, it's about minimizing your waste, because there's a lot less waste while maximizing your performance. In the same vein, further afield, you've got 3D printing of parts, wood parts, and that's made from upcycled sawdust. So you can see how you can achieve things by using waste, and that's outside the UK. Or in here, you're looking at not only the product, but the packaging. And in this case, we are looking at packaging that just disappear. And this is the big trend at the moment in the world of packaging, is how do you make packaging disappear rather than pollute the environment and end up, especially plastics, in the water. So here you've got that circularity, you've got no landfill, you've got no waste. That's the concept behind it. Or it could be bigger, like if you go in Australia, and they've tried to figure out how they build and use that food waste as an opportunity, as a room for energy. But it could also be, slightly closer to home, but still in Europe. And here what we're looking at is burning powder, metallic powder, steel powder, iron powder, to generate heat, and in a brewery. That's what they were looking at. That was in the Netherlands. And you can see how by burning these iron powder, then it can generate heat. So another route for recycling. And you've got Abacus developed, biodegradable for e-waste. So what they are using, and again, you're thinking about your packaging here, and the better sense, or the broader sense, rather a broader one. So that's another example of innovations and how to minimize waste. So we talked about that. In here is how they've used, again, you're looking at a circular economy, but it's how they've used glass and recycled glass into the construction industry. So I've mentioned that earlier on, and you can see that a few Scottish plan or Scottish venture into supporting the construction industry. In here, that was in France, and agri groups. They not only do they grow prawns for food, but they end up with the shells, and the shell they make a fertilizer, and with the fertilizer they grow vegetables. So that's the full circularity they are trying to develop. And then, as a function of the country you are, in here they're looking at coffee waste for again building houses. In Spain, they are looking at you've got Seville oranges in Seville, and they are actually a big issue because they are a big waste and they litter the streets. And whereas we may like them here, those Seville oranges, out there it becomes an issue. So if you think about it's the same thing than the gum in here, the chewing gum, where it's an issue for the councils. And what they've done is now they are collecting all that waste and they are using it to create biofuel. And with that biofuel, what they can do is they can run their water purification plants. So again, you can see circular economy. Gum here to do skateboard wheels. Again, the same concept further afield. Or you can look at using end-of-life products like tires, but instead of something complex, it's very simple in India. And finally here is another invention, which is about the use of hair, but in this case it's dog hair, and the use of mushroom for the soul. So to develop a product which is, circular and which also deliver on performance. So what do I want you to take from all that? And I'm not suggesting we should all become hairdressers or dogs groomers or anything like that. But what I want you to take from that is the value in waste and it being your own or someone else's. And even when you initially thought that there would not be. So it isn't straightforward that human hair or dog's hair have got value, but there is value. Ultimately, you want to minimize your waste. That's because, of course, that's a given. Even before net zero came along, that was a given. And you want to minimize organic waste, especially because that's the one that drives emission. But inorganic waste is also an opportunity. And finally, you can see through all those examples that customers and consumers are keen because that's what's driving it. They are interested and they are prepared to pay for it. So that we'll come back to that. There is a bit of a conundrum in all this because you want to minimize your waste and you come to a point where your waste is so little that the waste management company have got no interest in it. But that's the challenge, and that's why you want to look at what you can do with maybe other people's waste. So that would be my takeaway from all those innovations, which really are here more to tickle your curiosity, to drive that ideation process that you should probably get on to find out, do I want to play in those opportunities? So that's the whole part about innovation, which I think was the one people were the most interested in. I think now it's time for a break. We'll take a 5 minutes break, I think.
Yep, that sounds good. So we're at just 1 minute past 9. So we'll come back in 5 or 6 minutes time. We're in good shape for time. We do have one ask for you while we do that. Can you stop sharing your screen, Eric? And so we would like to take a snap poll on where you are for your organisation in terms of a route map for net zero. It's an anonymous poll on Mentimeter. I'm going to share that just now. The way you can do that is you can either open a browser window in the device you're viewing on, or probably easier than that is just to go to your phone, open a browser window, and hopefully you can see that now. If you go to www.menti.com, and use the code 35017212. And it's one simple question. Does your company have an agreed roadmap to achieve net zero as a business by a target date? I don't know what I did there. Can you still see it?
Yeah, I can.
You can still see
Yes,
it.
Paul.
Okay. And we do that as well as grabbing your cup of tea and a wee break, and we'll see you back in 5 minutes. Thanks all.
Okay, I think we're going to get up and running again. So we just looked at the big piece, as I said, innovation, and really the idea here was to try to jiggle all those thoughts and see the takeaway was about that circularity and the piece about organic waste and landfill. So we're going to go to the next piece, which is the define, and in define we look at the opportunities that that chapter is presenting, and it's based opportunities based on the Scottish Government planned actions. So what we anticipate is the policy the government is going to put in place are going to be designed to drive a set of outcomes that they want to see. And the first outcome they want to see is a reduction of landfill, and by default then looking at the reduction of emission from landfill, and also reducing landfill by reducing food waste, so organic waste, which are the big responsibility for emissions. And a big one for them is about circularity, and how are they going to enhance that concept of circularity and bring company to think in a circular fashion a bit more. So that's the outcomes they want to see, and by default they're going to design policies that deliver those outcomes, policies and fundings obviously. So if we look at the plan, the action plan they've put in place into that waste controls, which looking at go from prevention to disposal via recycling and reusing, the 4 R's. The big one is circular economy. That's the one the overarching they're trying to do, and we'll talk about what does circular economy means. The next one is looking about waste, and they are looking at waste from collecting data on waste. They're looking at waste and minimizing waste. And by minimizing waste, they'll be minimizing emissions. By minimizing waste, they'll be maximizing prevention of waste. So waste is the next one, and the last one is about landfill. So if they achieve what their ambition is in terms of waste, then by default there'll be an improvement in landfill. But they also want to look at landfill management improvements, if you want, and that's why the emission comes in. So not only do they want to reduce it, but they want to look at how do they manage. So there is 3 overarching areas, which is circularity, waste, and landfill. So circularity, what is circularity? So there is a piece about regenerative resources, and that's about in the 4 R, recover, reuse, remanufacture. You can see that on the right hand side. And there is another piece about the lifetime, and as part of the lifetime of the product, it goes for designing it. When you start it, how do you start it to maximize circularity? How do you start by maximizing material recovery opportunities? So there is a lot about that, about the design and how you package your product. But the overarching principle is use waste as a resource. That's what it is, and that's what I've tried to show in the innovation part we looked at earlier on. It's just that how can you use waste as an asset, as a resource? Waste has value, even when you think it didn't. And how can you drive circularity by having circularity from day one, starting with your sourcing all the way to using the product and how you dispose of it, how you distribute it. Everything needs to be circular. So that's a big deal. And that's also what the World Economic Forum or the Ellen MacArthur Foundations, which are 2 big think tanks, are looking at. So circularity. And then if you look at projects, so that's what we were looking at in our sections, then you've got things like the big projects at the Bean Park, which is a Project Beacon. And it's about developing advanced recycling and sorting facilities. That's their roadmap. and to look at plastic. So that's one project. That's in that section we're looking at big project we could get our teeth in. So an example here is regarding plastic. Another one with Strathclyde University is a GRP. So there is a recognition that we're doing all those wind farms and the wind farm of the future, but at the moment most of the wind farms are built out of GRP, and GRP, glass reinforced plastic, is very difficult to recycle because it's a thermoset. So it's not like the PET, like your plastic bottle type thing. So what there is here is there's a project plan to investigate how we can recycle all that GRP that's going to come to its end of life at some point. So we're putting it all out, but what are we going to do with it? And you've got Scottish Water, who's also looking at big projects. But what you can see here, the main point is what I mentioned earlier on, which is how they're going to drive through their supply chain the need for net zero, and they will select the low emission options. So that's one of the reasons why, so they've got a lot of projects, they've got a lot of plan on what they can do with all that estate they've got and what they use. But one of their key base or pillars, if you want, is going to be about the net zero selections. And that's why I was saying earlier on, you need to think about what your customer wants and the desirability for innovation. And in that sense, you can see how Northern Ireland Water is also looking at the same thing, and they're thinking about what can we do with your wastewater treatment process. And their idea here, which I think is quite interesting, is about using the water that comes out of it to create or to make hydrogen, which a lot of people are saying is the next step after electrification. But usually when you produce hydrogen, you end up with oxygen, and they are looking at using the oxygen to enhance their water treatment. So again, you can see here circularity, power coming from renewable energy. In here, they are suggesting wind. So a big project again, and that's a project they've done in partnership with Arab consultancy agency, and also some small business research initiative. So you can see here a big ambition. Another project. A project closer to home is a Virida project in the Clyde Valley, and here the idea is about how do you recycle the unrecyclable. What can you do for that? And the driver for that, the roadmap is again legislative requirements. So we talked about customer, we talked about legislations. We said in webinar or session 1 and 2, we mentioned how the government may drive results through legislation, and that's what you're seeing here coming through. So there's like how 70% of all waste stream will need recycle. So that's what they are looking at, and again that's in Scotland. So what's the takeaway from that section? The takeaway is there is a number of projects, large projects, small projects in Scotland and the UK, which are creating opportunities, and opportunities in all three sectors of circularity, waste, and landfill. So that's what you want to think about. How do I tap into those projects? What do they need? Scottish Water, Irish Water. What do they need? Northern Ireland Water, I mean. What do they need from you, or what do they consume? Could they consume from your facilities, your equipment, your production, the items you bring out, being products or services? So there's plenty to put your teeth in. So develop. We were looking at the skills. If you remember, that's the same. That's part of the Mentimeter we did at the end of session 2. And if we look at skills, then you've got the generic skills. So that's going to be needed regardless of the chapters. And the most important one here are what we call the meta skills, which is about, you know, self-management, and you're thinking here about focus and integrity. You're thinking about communications, you know, the ability to collaborate, because that's going to be a key, you know, in terms of innovation, ability to collaborate with your supplier, with your customer, and the ability to innovate by being curious and creativity. And the reason you're looking into those meta skills is they are unlikely, at least in the short to medium term, to be overtaken by robots. And as talked about in session 2, robots are quite fear factors at the moment. Automations at the low end of the workforce. And in case, if we look at specifically circularity and waste, so you're going to need skill in digitalizations. That's something we talked to one of our members yesterday about these, and about data collections, and how you minimize and manage those waste. Skills in that area. So you want to minimize waste, which is I mentioned earlier on, you know, and then when you've got waste, how do you manage it? And the other key thing is circularity across the board. So from design to production to usage to disposal. So those are the circular principles. And then you need skills also for resource efficiency, you know, because we looked at it, the regulation legislations coming in, you know, how people are going, or how government are going to legislate to make sure they get the outcome they are looking for, you know. But when innovation comes in, you're going to have new technology, and the key cornerstones of all this is the operator. And the operator is your employee, and how they're going to come and how they're going to have an impact into that roadmap, how they're going to be a key piece to that roadmap, and how you need to take them on board. So and the way to do that is through skills, through upskilling, reskilling, or bringing new skills in the house. So that's the skills for that area, for that. So what is needed? Who to upskill or to reskill? So that's a template of the thing I think you want to look at. So what skills do you need, you know, and what level do you need? Do you need expertise, or do you need just someone able to develop it, or you just need someone to maintain it, to run it, to fix it? And why do you need it? So is it because you don't have it in-house? Is that because you think to tap into that opportunity you need skills? And when do you need it? So is it an area where you're going to be looking at, I want to be there in the next 3 months, I want to be there in the next 12 months, and then how long do I need it? So do I need an expert for 6 months to get it up and running, or do I need someone for the life of the business because I'm going to be servicing it? And where are you going to get it? So you're looking at, you know, are you getting it on the job by training people, apprenticeship you need to think about here? Or is it going to be social, like Scottish Engineering, like how we can help you getting there? Or is it going to be formal, like, you know, formal training, like through universities or things like that? Last but not least, especially for SMA, is how much is it going to cost you to get there? And then what are the funding opportunities? So that's your roadmap, your actions. So and you're gonna have to identify the who. So who you're gonna train, you know, and what proficiency level they are at today, and what interest, because everybody's interested in being trained, but to apply that training and take that training forward, it can be a bit more challenging. So that's a what and a who, you know, we were looking at. But that's an example of how you could approach this. So that's the skills. Now, once you've identified that, where do you get those skills? So the first point of call is obviously academia. And that could be online, like the Open University. It could be physical, so in the classroom, like universities and colleges, or it could be institutes. So you've got various places where you can go and get those skills. As I said, it could be on the job, or it could be formal. Now, you're also looking at funding, and there are opportunities for fundings. You can get funding from the Scottish Funding Councils. You've got the KTN and the KTPs. The key one here you want to think about is Skills Development Scotland. It should be your first port of call. And you can see here on the left-hand side, I've put a couple of websites. You may want to have a look at it. And when I looked at it yesterday, you could see that in Scottish Enterprise that there was 448 support options. So that's quite a lot of options. Not all skill rated, not all funding rated, but at least 89 of those were about funding. So what you want to take away from this is that there is a lot of opportunities out there for support, and there is a lot of opportunity there for funding. It's a question of finding out which one you should apply to and what are the rules. And some examples are knowledge transfer through the KTN and the KTPs. Some examples are the National Transition Training Fund through Skills Development Scotland, or the latest one, the Flexible Workforce Development Fund through Skills. So there are fundings over there. So where to get them and how to fund them is available. And then also, if you don't want to bring those skills in-house, you can look at where you can go and tap into. And one of the areas you can do that is looking at institutes. And there is institute across Scotland. It's from the Highlands to the south of Scotland, and from all areas, being biotechnology, being Industry 4.0, being medical device, healthcare, so space, digital manufacturing. There's plenty of opportunities. So those are a list of centres where you can go and approach and say, look, I'm looking for skills, but I'm looking for skill either in the short term or the long term. Do I want to train someone, or do I just want the skills to get up and running? So that's where to get them. So what I want you to take away from that develop section is that there is, with innovation and new product and bringing new product on new service, you're going to need new skills. So this is how to get those skills, and there is guidance and support to acquire those skills. You just need to come out and ask, and in that sense, Scottish Engineering is more than happy to help you in that process. So that's the piece about development and about skills and about, remember, session 1 and 2, your employee are keen for a range of reasons, but your employee are keen to gain new skills and use those skills. So if we look at now the last piece of the puzzle, which is about delivering, about creating a smart roadmap, and the smart is quite the important piece, and usually what you find out what is missing in a lot of statements is the time bound of it. So how do you deliver? So you will develop a roadmap, and that's an example here I'm sharing with you, which is looking at a roadmap and addressing the scope 1, 2, and 3. So scope 1, if you remember, that's what you emit from your plant. Scope 2 is what the energy supplier emits. So the energy you buy, and scope 3 is all the emissions either upstream from your supplier or downstream for your distribution, if you want, to your customer. And there is a recognition in that example that ETS or emission trading scheme will be required. The likelihood to end up at zero emission is pretty small. So there is a recognition that at some point ETS will need to be used. The driver, though, is that ETS should not be the first port of call, but ETS come at a cost, and therefore, if you want, one of the things you want to do is minimize your emission to minimize your need for ETS, and therefore minimize your cost. So that's an example, and there is tools, and that's an example of a tool, the SDG Action Manager. that you could look into, which drive, you know, actions and track your progress and what you're aiming to do and how you're going on that road. So there are tools out there available to help you getting there. And then process-wise, it's about leveraging what you've got. And what we are finding out is that most of the companies are relying on guidance and standards, but some frameworks, some tools, in 93% of the cases, and in most of the cases, you can start with 14,000, but 14,000 is not the only one. You've already got 14,064, which allow you to do the measure, because the big challenge is, what do I need to measure? And then how am I going to measure it and verify it? So the 14,000 is a management tool, but the other ones are just as important and significant. And you've got other opportunities like 50,000, which has its own advantage and limitations. And you've got the PS, but those are British specific. They come from the BSI. So they are. Here what we're saying is, don't reinvent the wheel. Use what you've got in house. Use what you're already measuring. Don't spend too much time creating more work than you need to. And this is an example I provided about 14,001 and how you can drive and create and link 14,001 with the climate change in your roadmap. And in here, I've got example from the first close of 14,001, which is 4.1, to the last close, which is 10.3, and there is example for every closes. So that's a way to look at it and start with something you've already got. And finally, there is funding available, right? And those are examples. So you've got Innovation Fund Call, you've got the Green Job Fund, which I'll come back to later, and you've got some European funding to which Scotland's got access to. And that so you've got funding about innovation, funding about jobs, funding about circularity, and you've got funding about skills like the KTP I mentioned earlier on. So there are opportunity to help you financially along that roadmap. And a couple of examples, and they are not the only one, is like Zero Waste Scotland. It's got a circular economy investment fund, which is looking at, you know, funding circular economy and circular economy principles and how they can help. And here I'm describing what they are focusing on, which is built on the food system, bioeconomy. What you can see in there is what, again, aligned with the actions that have been identified by the Scottish government. So that's one of the funding. The other funding is, which is the Green Job Fund, and again you can look at, you know, but the call is the call 1 is finishing next week. But I think we have sent a communication out on that early on this month, but we anticipate call 2 coming up and more calls coming up. So it's not because you've missed call 1 that you've missed it forever. But it just shows you here the opportunity, and you need to remember that green recovery has to be fair. That's one of the key areas that the government. So what helps any of those grants and funds is, does it create jobs? Do you improve your internal skills? Skills and jobs are key pieces to that. So what's to take away from that deliver section is that guidance, tool and support exists, it's available, it's out there, and it exists to develop that roadmap. And remember, we are looking for a smart roadmap, and therefore it's how you measure and communicate its progress. Once you've developed the roadmap, then you need to commit to give an update on how well you're doing against that roadmap and those KPI you've developed. And fund its implementation is another option. There are funding available, there are support, and it's just a case of identifying what is value for money in that fund, because not all funding is going to deliver 100% of the cost. Unlikely to any funding will actually do that. There'll still be a level of investment required regardless of the size of your company. And there will be other constraints, but remember that they all be linked back to the outcome, and the outcome will drive the policy, and the policy will drive the funding and the constraint attached to the funding. That's how it's.
Eric, you're on mute.
Have I been on mute all the time?
No, just when I said that, you're back off mute now, but it was just when you're talking about funding. Like, it was literally just a few seconds. Yeah, you've done the Green Job Fund, we're okay.
Okay, so sorry about that. Sorry, everybody. I don't know how I did it on mute, but there you go. So yeah, I was talking about the Green Job Funds, and what we're saying is that the call is finishing next week, the 24th. But this is call one, so it's still offering opportunities. And the other point I was making is that there will be, for a lot of the grants, there is an expectations that recovery, that green recovery we want, is going to be a fair green recovery. And in that sense, that's where people are looking at job creation, they're looking at upskilling, and how do you bring skills in-house, and how do you leverage skills outside, but more importantly, how do you create jobs, and ideally green jobs. And another point I was making was that we looked at it in session 1 and 2. Your employees are keen. They are keen on getting new skills, upskilling, reskilling. There is a concern about all that automation and those robots are going to take my job or not. So what the takeaway was about how there is help out there, being guidance, being tools, being supports for fundings. There's help in developing that roadmap. There is help in measuring its progress and how well it's doing versus the KPI you have identified, and what you're committing to do. And once you've developed that roadmap and you've communicated it, and then so what to measure, and because that's usually the challenge, is what do you include and not include, especially scope 3 can be quite challenging. And there is funds available to drive its implementations. So it's never going to be 100% of the funding. There's always going to be a level of funding. But remember, it's all about the way it works is the government is expecting outcomes. Those outcomes will drive policies, and those policies will drive the fundings, and the fundings will have constraints, and those constraints will be linked to that. And so that's what there is. So there's help out there, and we're here to help. So I think Mary's been out from Scottish Engineering and suggesting about one-to-ones, and we are more than happy to help in that sense. So summary of chapter 5 is that we looked at chapter 5. We looked at innovations. And how do you build visions out of that? It's just to help you in the ideation process, looking at what you do and how you can tap into the opportunities, which is the motivations. And as I mentioned, the opportunities are driven by the outcomes. The outcomes expected drives actions, and the actions drives projects. So we talked about projects, and big projects you could put your teeth in, but they're not all big. So it's to look into that. And then once you've identified, the innovations and the opportunities you want to tap into, then the question is, do you have the skills? And we looked at, for chapter 5 especially, you know, what skills do you need and how you're going to access them and how you're going to fund them. And then once you've identified all of that, then you need to build a roadmap. And we showed, you know, an example of the pathways and tools. Like ISO 14,000 and funding. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Yeah. So that's a summary of chapter 5, and you end up with innovation, but you need all 4 pillars as we discussed. So that's what we've done. That's what the webinar has been about. I would like to take that opportunity to thank you all for taking the time to join us this morning. And then we have started a one-to-one program, which I mentioned in the previous webinar. And please do not hesitate to reach out. If we can help, we'll be more than happy to do so. Rebecca, I shall hand over to you maybe for the questions. Or
Sure, I don't think there's any questions in the chat at the moment. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask Eric? No, sir, no questions today. Well, if you've got any questions, feel free to email them to us, and we'll get back to you. Or if you'd like a one-to-one session, then to get in touch and we can arrange that. Eric, anything? Okay, well then, thank you very much to everybody.
Okay. Yeah.
Eric, are you there?
Yeah, thank you to all of you for attending. To Rebecca's point, please don't hesitate to reach out with any question. We're more than happy to help. It's a lot to digest, I think. I think the recording and the presentations are going to be put on the website for people to get access to.
Yes, we'll do that probably early next week.
Okay, so and then you can go back and have a look and think about, and then come back out and don't hesitate. We started a one-to-one program, and I must say it's been very educational and very useful. So please use the opportunity. Okay. Shall we close the meeting here?